the Politics of Survival. I'm your host, Tara Reid. There was a horrific, terrible, violent terrorist attack in Moscow, Russia. As you all know, 147 people lost their lives that were planning on going to a concert. Some were shopping, going to restaurants at the Crocus Hall in Moscow, Russia, just outside in Northwest. Gunmen went in and opened fire, shooting people point blank, even stabbing some people. There's over 100 people injured as well, and there are many women and children that were killed and also injured. It was a very tragic and sad and shocking event. And then post this event, the Russian investigation continued to apprehend the individuals, which they did, all the terrorists, and now they're trying to identify who was behind the plot. Unfortunately, the United States of America has chosen to be very bellicose with its rhetoric and not very forthcoming with information from intelligence, are trying to pull blame away from Ukraine when Russia is asserting that Ukraine did indeed have something to do with this awful terrorist attack, and U.S. and British intelligence agency may have been involved. Now, all of this, I'm not going to comment on further, except to say that you have to look at history and the U.S. track record. You have to allow the Russian investigation to continue and come to its conclusion, and they will be forthcoming with the real mastermind behind this horrific attack that affected so many people. Living here in Moscow, one thing I noticed was the way the people immediately here gathered around each other. There were 3 hours lines to give blood. Different people were going and paying their respects and giving flowers, and in embassies all over the world. And in fact, almost everywhere, with the exception of Kiev, there was an outpouring of sympathy and concern for the Russian people, as it should be. They had a beautiful display of animated cranes and music and candles for a vigil that they had in Moscow. And the Russian government is, of course, helping the people that were affected directly by this tragedy, paying off their debts, making sure that they have enough food and money and things to survive. Again, this has been a horrific shock because Moscow, and I can tell you this from living here, you feel very safe. And it was called a city hall, but it wasn't a city hall. That's just the translation into English. It was actually a concert hall and a shopping mall and restaurants. And it's somewhere people will go after a Friday night. And the band that they were going to see was Picnic, which is a very popular Russian band, back from years ago. And so there was people of all different ages and a lot of teens. Again, my heart and sympathy goes to the Russian people. They have been so good to me here in the Russian Federation, providing me with solace and comfort as I went through my difficult time. And now they need our comfort and sympathy. So tonight we have a special show. We have with us the UN Ambassador, Dmitry Polyanskiy of the Russian Federation, and he will be discussing his views on the terrorist attack, representing the UN Security Council, and also recent events that just happened with the ceasefire in Gaza resolution that the Russian Federation was trying to put forward and other nations were trying to get forward. The U.S. did abstain, and the U.S. has since said that the resolution is non-binding, which is very confusing because that's not supposed to be legally the case. And he can get into the intricacies of that and explain what non-binding and binding means in terms of the UN. So we have a really informative, good show for you this evening, talking with Dmitry. Please stick around and watch it and enjoy. Also, I love your questions. Please feel free to DM me on X. You can find me at Reed Alexandra, R-E-A-D-E, Alexandra, or at Tara in Exile is another account that I use as I'm covering the election stuff that's happening in the U.S. But feel free to use either one of those and contact me, reach out. I also have a Telegram channel, Tara Reid. Follow INN And I really want to thank my producers, Reef and Indy, who worked so hard, and Greg on graphics, to make sure that we have this show every week. So a big shout out to them and thank you and gratitude. So sit back, watch, and send us your questions. And thank you again, everyone, for supporting and watching this show, The Politics of Survival. Welcome back, Ambassador. It's been a while since you've been on the show, and I was going to have you on sooner, and then some events happened last week. In fact, a week from Friday last was, the terrible, horrific terrorist attack, and I have felt really heartsick being here in Moscow, seeing the pain and suffering that has happened. And I know it must be hard for you as well.
Thank you. It's really a very painful event, and we all were quite devastated when we learned about it. But there is a big compassion to us here in the United Nations as well. We managed to agree on Security Council press statement very, very soon, a few hours after the attack. We opened the book of condolences, and a lot of our colleagues came and made inscription into this book, regardless of other divergences of positions that we might have. But here they were very, very much united and compassionate in expressing their condolences to us.
As they should, as everyone in the world should. And I did, I am American and living here in Moscow, Russia. And one of the things that was particularly painful for me to witness was that my former place of residence, my former government, decided to be very cagey about the whole thing, and gave an illusion, in my opinion, that something is being held back. They were trying to almost protect Ukraine and Kiev, and immediately putting out information when I really thought it should let the Russian investigators complete their investigation and come to their conclusions and release that to the public. So that was difficult to watch as an American citizen. And then I wanted to inquire, because there's just been breaking news that cryptocurrency, Russian investigators have revealed that cryptocurrency was used to send these terrorists, these terrible people, money to carry out their deeds, their awful deeds. And that money came from Ukraine. Now, that's what the Russian investigators are putting forward. I know you may be in your capacity limited to comment on or expand further, but I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about the US reaction and the knee-jerk comments by Senator Graham and Biden and others that were trying to throw everything on ISIS and bring that up again. What are some of your thoughts on that? That, I know our American listeners in particular and British listeners are curious.
Well, frankly, the US reaction and the reaction of some other Western countries was a little bit telling. It was particularly striking against the background that they, until now, are very reluctant to do anything to find and bring to accountability those who are behind the sabotage act in Nord Stream, for example. So they are absolutely not hasty. And then all of a sudden, being thousands of miles from the place, they make a conclusion that they have absolute certainty of the linkage of Islamic terrorists to this attack and shielding Ukraine from it. I really don't know what they have. I don't know the data that they have, but it looks very suspicious, frankly, especially given the fact that there are so many discrepancies in the version that would link this attack to Islamic State. They were repeatedly highlighted by specialists, by experts. We don't want to rush to the conclusions. I indeed prefer to abstain from commenting this topic more, because we are waiting for official results of our investigation, which is ongoing and which is progressing quite rapidly as far as I can see. And we also noticed this breaking news that you mentioned. This might be a very, very important piece of a puzzle, but we will wait for the whole puzzle to be shaped, and I'm absolutely sure that we will have to say a lot of things to international community. But let's not precipitate things, and let's wait for the end of official investigation.
Yes, I agree. I think that there's been a lot of rhetoric and a lot of speculation from the West without proper knowledge, unless they had intelligence that they're not sharing with the Russian Federation. And I've seen some confusion online from Western audiences where they're asking, wait a second, isn't there some sort of an agreement, be it unwritten or just spoken, that when there's a terrorist, when there's an information that there might be a terrorist attack, that governments, even rival governments, would cooperate and give every bit of information they could to prevent something like that. And we saw the letters from the US embassy and the the British embassy warning people 2 weeks before to stay away from large, that there might be a terrorist attack. And in fact, in the verbiage of that warning, it mentioned concert hall, a concert hall. And I noticed that when I saw it, and it made me take pause and think, what does this mean? You have some former intelligence from America who are whistleblowers who have called it a black swan kind of event, or planned in some way in we don't know. But I guess my question to you is there an agreement diplomatically between countries, even that are rival, that if they have knowledge of any kind, that they'll share everything they have with that other nation?
Well, the situation that you described, Tara, also adds to the suspicions and prompts some kind of assumption that some information has been withheld. But I am absolutely sure this is also one thing that is being thoroughly examined by our specialists. As for the agreement, I'm not a specialist on bilateral relations. I know that there was such an agreement. There are international agencies also, like Interpol, for example. I haven't heard about disruption of these agreements, but it's clear that they were put on pause by Western countries. Even if they are not disrupted, even if they are not cancelled, they are not willing to engage in any cooperation with Russia, including in this domain. I assume that there are contacts between our special services. I hope that there are. I'm not aware of any of that. But I hope that they still keep contacts at professional level, which were always a very important factor for keeping the stability in the world and avoiding certain undesirable developments. But I have no proof to support my assumption. So in this case, of course, if US has some kind of information that would be beneficial and fruitful for our investigators, it would be absolutely natural for them to share this information. But I'm absolutely not confident, and I'm having no confirmation that they did it, frankly.
One final question on the subject matter, and then we'll move on. From a diplomatic point of view, if this is true, that Ukraine, which then implies that the West, because both British intelligence and American intelligence is funding and supporting Ukraine, obviously, in this proxy war against Russia. So there's no question about that, right? So if it's true that Ukraine provided this money through cryptocurrency and is behind the mastermind, if you will, behind this horrible attack, diplomatically, what does that mean for the US and Russia? Is that a flashpoint? Is that a red line? Or is that something that, because you were here in the United States, you're there, excuse me, in the United States, in New York City, what does that mean for you, for all of you in the Russian delegation trying to do your work with a government that may have been behind this?
Well, we absolutely make no secret in the fact that we condemn the way the Western countries are beefing up Ukraine with weapons. We are very vocal about this during Security Council meetings, and we believe that this behavior, this absolutely responsible behavior from from NATO, from the US, from the UK, first and foremost, complicates any diplomatic efforts to find a way out from this Ukrainian crisis. And you know that these efforts started long before the launch of our special military operation. There was an important military buildup in Ukraine under the shield, under the smokescreen of Minsk agreements for many years. Now this is a proven fact. And it only continued with more intensity when our special military operation started. And now, at this point, actually, this military assistance or military supplies are the only lifeline for the Zelensky regime, because it has already squandered everything that it had from military equipment and the army. So in this sense, as we said at one of the Security Council meetings, one of the recent meetings, the goal of demilitarization of Ukraine in proper Ukraine has been already fulfilled, because Ukraine does not possess anything, any weapons of its own. It only uses what the West is sending it. As for the possible linkage of Ukraine, it's still formally a hypothetical assumption. If of course if it proves right, it will be a big news. And I think this question would be logical to be asked by fellow Americans, by American citizens, how they view the fact that their government is supporting with their taxpayers' money states like Ukraine. Even if we put aside this military side of the problem, let's imagine that it doesn't exist, though it of course exists. Let's view it from the point of view of supporting a truly authoritarian regime, a dictator, cancelled elections, who is becoming illegitimate very soon, who doesn't want to share any power, who prosecutes his political opponents, who keeps a lot of political prisoners in jail. It's enough to recall the fate of Gonzalo Lira, the American blogger, and the United States government still pretends that they don't know anything about it. They don't want to press Ukraine. They didn't want to save his life. They had plenty of opportunity to save his life. It was not difficult for them, but they tried to ignore this fact. And Gonzalo was only one of thousands of political prisoners, of those who dared to criticize Zelensky regime, and they found their fate in prison right now. Is it really becoming for the United States, which proclaims the principles of support of democracy, free speech, and whatever, to support a country like this? So all this together, I think, prompts a lot of questions for the US citizens to ask to their government. It's up to them, of course, to decide. We're not interfering in this process, but I would be very much concerned about this if I were living here in the US and not working.
Absolutely. I wanted to shift topics to something that you've been obviously working on very hard, which is the issue that's going on with the horrible amount of civilian deaths in the thousands of women and children in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians, by the Israeli. And of course, the US, again, being on the wrong side of history, is funding Israel with weapons on one hand, and has been adamant against a ceasefire. Finally, they just abstained to vote. So the UN Security Council, which you were present, voted for a ceasefire in Gaza, because you're not only watching the people being killed, but you're also now watching them being starved, and aid, which is literally miles, just a few miles away, is not able to get to the people that need it, and people are starving. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. It's horrific to watch in real time. Yes, this happened in Iraq, but I think the image is becoming more real on social media and in real time, really drives home just the absolute evil of this genocide. I wanted to ask you, because one of the questions I've seen online over and over for our audience to educate them, when the US was asked about abstaining from voting on the ceasefire, okay, the answer came from both John Kirby and Jake Sullivan. They both are, John Kirby's head of the NSA, and Jake Sullivan was speaking on behalf of the White House and the Pentagon. And they were saying that the UN Security Council ceasefire is non-binding. So people didn't understand the difference between a binding resolution and non-binding. And what does that mean? If they're saying that it's not binding, then what is the purpose of the UN Security Council, and why doesn't it have more teeth? So could you kind of explain that?
It's a legitimate question, Tara. We were all asking ourselves this question, and we were very frustrated. I think it was a very clumsy attempt to cajole Israel by the US, because you know that Israel was frustrated. They wanted US to veto this resolution, which calls, for the first time, you're absolutely right, it calls for immediate ceasefire for the months of Ramadan. This is not what we wanted 100%. We wanted the call, demand, not the call, but demanding, and that's also demand. The resolution is demanding immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We wanted it to be permanent, but there is a sentence that it is leading to durable, lasting ceasefire. So it's better than nothing, and it really opens a lot of opportunities for UN agency, for us all to work and to press Israel first and foremost to implement the provisions of this resolution, because you're absolutely right. The situation is absolutely horrible in Gaza, and especially now when we see that that assistance is really on the borders, on the frontiers of Gaza, and US and the others are trying to invent some kind of very strange ways to deliver it, like from airdropping or from sea, instead of pressing Israel just to open the crossing points, which is the easiest solution, and to let the food get to the people. So Israel was very frustrated because of US decision. Previously, US always vetoed even the hint for a ceasefire. They wanted, they promoted some strange constructions, like creating conditions for ceasefire, or the last resolution that we had to veto with our Chinese colleagues was speaking about determining imperative of immediate ceasefire. So it's so sophisticated. I don't know. My English fails me when I try to analyze what is a determining imperative of ceasefire. But it's absolutely sure that it's not about ceasefire. It's about imperative. Right. Now we have ceasefire on paper, which is very important. We were, without any irony, we were very happy that US was on board this time, and they abstained. But Israel wasn't, and that's why they made this very clumsy attempt. First, the PR, Linda, mentioned it in the statement, explanation of the votes. All of a sudden, we all were absolutely astonished by this, saying that this is a non-binding resolution. It's not true. All the resolutions of Security Council are binding. Okay. And of course, Linda and her team know it perfectly well. But for some PR reason, I don't know, they decided to launch this signal which would be met in Israel, maybe in the United States, in some circles, as some kind of indication that nothing serious has happened, there is no change in US policy, and that Israel can continue to duck from the implementation of the decisions of the UN Security Council. This assessment was repeated by Mr. Kirby. You're absolutely right, which added to this situation some kind of suspense. Reporters repeatedly asked US delegation of how they can clarify this issue. We also raised this issue during yesterday's, I think, Security Council meeting on the Middle East on other topic, but still asking direct questions to the US delegation. I saw some information that they started to a little bit eat their words, you know, making it sound a little bit normal, like despite the fact somebody, I think Ms. St. Pierre, that's the name of yes. White House spokesperson, she said something like, despite the fact that there are no binding elements, the resolution should be implemented. This is already a shift. But well, everything is binding that is adopted by the Security Council. That's the point. There are resolutions that are being adopted under specifically mentioned under Chapter 7, which imply the use of force, but it's not necessarily that every resolution that needs to be implemented should mention Chapter 7. Sometimes it is determined depending on the situation. So, of course, there is no doubt that this resolution is binding, and there is no doubt that United States, as a permanent member, as one of the founders of the United Nations, should do its best to press Israel to implement the provisions of this resolution, to declare ceasefire, and to help to bring necessary assistance to the residents of Gaza.
You know, I'm going to ask you sort of a speculative question here.
Mm.
Where does this leave it? And do you think that the U.S. is trying to delegitimize the UN Security Council? In other words, take away its power in a sense, because there's been a push sometimes to have it moved or dissolved or whatever, which would be a diplomatic disaster, I think, and a very sad thing. But what is your thoughts about that? Is it an attempt to just take away any kind of legitimacy of the UN Security Council by saying this resolution is non-binding? Or do you think it was really simply to save face in the media for the US? What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't go as far as this. I don't see any indications that this is a part of a long-term strategy of the United States. United States itself is interested in the Security Council, and there are a lot of proofs of that. Mm-hmm. But I think it was more a PR stunt. Maybe the calculation was that this first kind of breaking news would be remembered by many people who are not very much acquainted with the work of Security Council and the peculiarities of its decisions, and they will remember it. And that when after several days there will be some kind of a different language, they will just not notice it, and that many people in the US and in Israel will be misled in this positive for the US way, assuming that nothing has changed and that this decision of the UN Security Council has no weight. I think that's more tactical. And again, they started to retract. It's visible that they started to use more calibrated assessment. They will come to the moment when they will say, of course, all the resolutions are binding, but they will just not put it bluntly as they should, like answering, yes, this resolution is binding. They will try to frame it differently. It's a very complicated diplomatic maneuvering that they are now taking for the obvious cause, not to make Israel too angry and not to kind of over dramatize the change that has happened in their position on the vote when they supported when they let this resolution pass. They didn't support it, they abstained, but they didn't use veto for the first time since the beginning of this hot stage of Israel-Palestine conflict.
Well, you know, and you have many politicians that are bending the knee to AIPAC, which is, you know, the Israel funding of politicians in the US. So I'm sure as a diplomat, you notice that, you know, Lindsey Graham, for an example, $100 million, millions of dollars go to these politicians to have their opinions match Israel's. So you see that. Also, you have a large percent, I believe it's, and I don't want to get the number wrong, it's between 27% and 33% of Israelis have US passports. So you have an entanglement with Israel over the Palestine question. And so that must be hard as a diplomat. So here you have people that are needing a ceasefire, that are not wanting to get shot while they're trying to get water or aid, and the aid needs to get through. What are the next steps? And do you see any hope in the immediate future for the aid, like the water and food and the immediate needs being met, and the people not being shot at when they're trying to get their relief?
Tara, there is enormous pressure on the US which is behind this change of position. And now US is, well, several days ago, before the vote on this resolution, US was completely isolated here in the UN, maybe together with Israel and some very tiny countries which depend 100% on the US. But all the others, even the UK, they couldn't really stand side by side with the US position on this issue. That's why the pressure is very big, and I'm quite sure that this is only the beginning. The constructive part of international community, those who are aware of the situation and those who can't tolerate what's happening in Gaza, will press further. And now, of course, it's the question of how this resolution will be implemented. It's also a question of urgent delivery of humanitarian assistance. We are ready to do so, and UN agencies are waiting for ceasefire to do so. And then, of course, it comes the question of what will be after, and I'm sure that Security Council will be very instrumental in this regard, because we have seen in this last crisis that we are facing right now in the Middle East, that the US policy, the policy of unilateral quiet diplomacy, is not working. You know that they were absolutely incapable of calculating this crisis, despite of the fact that they were very much involved in all the activities with Israel, with Palestinians, with the others. Mr. Sullivan, if I'm not mistaken, just a week before this crisis, said that the situation in the Middle East has never been calmer than it is right now, trying to advertise US quiet diplomacy. So it's something that should be done in multilateral format, not only by the US. The US is a part of this. Nobody's saying that, nobody's denying this, but it's only a part. There should be the others. There should be Arabic countries, of course. There should be the countries of the region, European countries, Russia, China, Iran, whoever. We need all to play some positive role here and to find a long-term solution to avoid this kind of crisis. And to do so, of course, the US has to align with the principle of international law, not the rules-based international order which they design for themselves, but international law, which is based on the UN Charter. And this is inevitable. I think that Security Council will be quite instrumental for this in the nearest future. I'm sorry, I think I need to go, Tara.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. And before you go, if you could please tell people how they can follow you and watch for more activity with the UN Security Council.
Well, we try to be very open in social media. I have a Twitter account. You can find it by my name, Dmitry Polyanskiy. I have also English language Telegram account and Russian language Telegram account. So Telegram is now indispensable source of information. I think it's the quickest and the fastest way to learn what's happening, and you can learn from many sources from different type of information, and it's up to you to choose and to pick up what you want to read. That's why I'm personally using it very much, and I'm most active in Russian segment of Telegram. But my Twitter is also quite known in the UN. I have a lot of followers, and I would be very glad to welcome new followers. And my direct message is open, and when I have some time, I can even engage in conversations if there are quite interesting and important questions with some of my subscribers. So
right,
thank you very
much for your time. Thank you so much, Ambassador, and good luck to you. Take care.
Thank you very much. Good luck.